Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. All right, lads, let's get into this because the situation with Sophie Cunningham and the Indiana Fever is starting to feel a lot more complicated than people initially thought. And I'm not gonna lie, the more you actually sit down and break this thing apart, the more it starts to look like there's a very real chance she's not back next season. Now, I know that's not what a lot of Fever fans want to hear. Sophie has become a big part of the identity of this team. She brings toughness, she brings shooting, she brings that edge that every good team needs. But at the end of the day, this isn't just about fit or vibes. It's about money, roster construction, and how the Fever are planning to build around their core going forward. And right now, those things are all pointing in a direction where keeping both Sophie Cunningham and Lexie Hull just doesn't seem realistic. Let's start with the biggest issue, cap space and positional needs. Because here's the reality. The Fever cannot just stack wings and ignore everything else. Last season made one thing painfully obvious. The power forward position was a problem. A big problem, and not the kind you can just patch over by sliding a wing up a position and hoping it works. We already saw what happens when you try to play Sophie at the 4 for extended stretches. It's not that she can't do it in small bursts, she can, but over the course of a full season against bigger, more physical forwards, it just doesn't hold up consistently. You lose size, you lose interior presence, and it puts way too much pressure on your center. And that brings us to another key point, the center situation. Aaliyah Boston is elite, no question. But she's not one of those massive, dominant 6'6" or 6'7" centers who can just erase every mismatch. She's more of a modern, mobile big. That means she actually needs help in the front court. She needs a legitimate power forward next to her, someone who can stretch the floor, defend bigger bodies, and take some of that physical burden off her shoulders. And here's the problem. Those types of players are rare, like genuinely rare. We're talking about stretch fours who can shoot, defend, and fit into a modern system. That's one of the most valuable archetypes in basketball right now. And because of that, they don't come cheap and they don't come easy. You're not just finding one in free agency for a bargain. You're not just pulling one out of the draft this year either, because let's be honest, that type of player isn't really there in this class. And overseas, same story. Plenty of guards, plenty of wings, but true stretch forwards? Almost none. So if you're the Fever, you have to prioritize that position. And once you accept that, everything else starts to fall into place. Or rather, fall apart when it comes to keeping both Sophie and Lexie. Because now we get into the money side of things. And this is where things get really interesting. We've already seen what the market is starting to look like. Players who are solid, not stars, not elite, are getting massive offers. We're talking about forwards getting close to or around $900K per year, and not even elite ones, just solid rotation level players who can shoot a bit and fill a role. That's the market now. So if that's what those players are getting, what do you think Sophie Cunningham is worth? Because let's be real, she's better than that tier. She brings more to a team. Shooting, toughness, experience, personality, leadership. She's a valuable piece, the kind of player contenders actually want. There is no world where she's not getting offers in that same range. And then you look at Lexie Hull. Now, some people might try to downplay her value, but teams aren't thinking like that. They're looking at her as a high-energy wing, strong defender, improving shooter, and someone who can fit into multiple systems. That's valuable, very valuable. And the fact that she didn't just immediately accept a qualifying offer tells you everything you need to know. She wants to test the market. She wants to see what she's worth. And honestly, she should.
Because if teams are throwing around that kind of money for similar players, there's no way she's coming in at a low number. No chance. She's getting serious offers, which creates a massive problem for Indiana. Because the Fever can't just say, all right, we'll match everything. They have limits. They can maybe stretch to around $500K for one of these players. Maybe. But when you're talking about offers potentially pushing $700K, $800K, even $900K, that's a gap you simply cannot close. And this is where the tough decisions come in. Because if you match a big offer for Lexie Hull, what happens to Sophie? If you try to keep Sophie, what happens to your ability to fix the power forward position? If you go out and sign a proper stretch four, which you need to do, where does that leave your remaining cap space? You can't have everything, and that's the harsh reality of building a roster. Now, some people will say, well, Sophie might take a discount. And yeah, she probably would, to an extent. She seems like the type of player who values situation, culture, and fit. She's talked about stability, long-term plans, even life stuff like buying a house. That all matters. But let's be clear about something. There's a difference between a small discount and a massive pay cut. Taking $100K less? Sure, maybe. Taking $200K less? Possibly. But $300K? $400K? $500K? That's not a discount. That's a completely different contract here. And no smart player is doing that, especially not when they're in their prime and looking for long-term security. Because this isn't just about one season. This is about setting yourself up financially for the future. So when people casually say, oh, she'll just stay for less, I don't think they fully grasp how big those differences actually are. And then there's the timeline factor. Sophie wants a long-term deal. That's been pretty clear. She's not just looking for a one-year situation. She wants stability. But can the Fever offer that? Not really. Not at the level she's likely to get elsewhere. Because they're trying to balance multiple things at once, building around their core, managing cap space, addressing positional needs, and keeping flexibility for future moves. Locking in a big, long-term contract for Sophie might not fit into that plan. And then you add in the little things, like the podcast situation. Now, I'm not saying that's definitive proof of anything, but when a player says they're going to release something and then suddenly doesn't during free agency, it raises eyebrows, because that could mean something changed. Maybe there was a deal in place that didn't go through. Maybe another team came in with a bigger offer. Maybe the Fever made a move elsewhere that shifted priorities. We don't know, but it's another layer to this whole situation that just adds to the uncertainty. And speaking of uncertainty, let's not forget the other moving pieces. The Ty Harris situation, the Kelsey Mitchell negotiations. All of these things impact how much money is available and where it gets allocated. If more money than expected is tied up in other deals, that makes it even harder to bring Sophie back. So when you step back and look at the full picture, it's not just one factor, it's everything combined. Cap space, positional needs, market value, roster balance, future planning. And unfortunately, when you put all of that together, it paints a pretty clear picture. Keeping Sophie Cunningham is going to be very, very difficult. Not impossible, but difficult. And unless something unexpected happens, like a major discount, a surprise trade, or a completely different approach to roster building, it feels like the odds are leaning toward her moving on. Which again, is tough, because she's a great fit in a lot of ways. But sometimes it's not about fit. Sometimes it's just about numbers. And right now, the numbers aren't adding up. So tell me what you think. Don't forget, like and subscribe.